You know that feeling, right? That immense pressure that just keeps building as exams get closer? Well, that's stress. And in psychology, we have this really powerful tool for dealing with it. It's called social support. Today, we're going to break down exactly what it is, how it works, and how you can use this knowledge to craft an absolutely perfect A-level essay. So let's dive right in. We've structured this whole explainer to be just like a top-tier essay. We'll start with the core knowledge, that's your AO1, then we'll move on to applying it for AO2, and after that, we'll get critical and evaluate it for AO3. Finally, we'll wrap it all up into a conclusion that is just going to hit all the right marks.
Okay, so first things first, we've got to lock down our AO1 knowledge. What in the world do we actually mean when we talk about social support?
At its heart, social support is all about the resources, both psychological and practical, that we get from other people. It's a real cornerstone of the AQA specification because honestly, it's a perfect example of the biopsychosocial model. It shows how our biology, our psychology, and our social world all tangle together to affect how we experience stress.
Now, to really nail those AO1 marks, you need to know the four main types of functional support. First, you've got emotional support. That's having someone just listen and comfort you. Then, there's instrumental support. Think of this as tangible, practical help, like your parents making you dinner during a crazy revision week. Next up is informational support. That's getting advice, maybe from a teacher. And finally, esteem support. This is when someone boosts your confidence, telling you you've got this. All right, so we know what it is, but how does it actually work to reduce stress? This is where we get into the key theories, and this bridges our AO1 knowledge right into AO2 application. So back in 1985, Cohen and Wills proposed two main ideas. The direct effects hypothesis suggests that, hey, support is pretty much always good for us. But the buffering hypothesis, and this one is absolutely crucial for your essays, argues that social support is like this protective shield. It becomes most powerful when we're under a lot of stress, like right before an exam. It literally buffers us from the negative impact. And this isn't just some vague psychological feeling either. It has a real, measurable biological impact. Social support can actually calm down the body's major stress response systems, the superfast SAM system that pumps out adrenaline, and the slower HPA axis, which is responsible for that pesky stress hormone, cortisol. A classic study by Comark and his colleagues demonstrates this perfectly. What they did was they put people through a pretty stressful math task to see if something as simple as having a friend in the room could make a real biological difference. Now, what's so cool about this slide is the result. It is just so clear. When the participants had a supportive friend with them, their cardiovascular reactivity, we're talking heart rate, blood pressure, was significantly lower than when they had to face that stressor all alone. It's a brilliant illustration of the buffering effect in action. But for those top AO3 marks, we have to evaluate this study using GRAVE. So, G for generalizability? Not so great. They used young, healthy students. What about R for reliability? Well, that's high because it was a standardized lab procedure, totally replicable. A for applicability. This is a big yes. It supports things like buddy systems in workplaces. V for validity. Internal validity is high because they used objective biological measures. And E for ethics. All good. The stress task was temporary and well-controlled. So there's this subtle but really vital distinction to make here. Research shows that perceived support, which is just the belief that you have people who would help if you needed them, is often an even more powerful stress buffer than the received support you actually get. Just knowing that safety net is there can be enough. Okay, let's move on. It's time for AO2. Let's apply this theory to a real-world scenario that, well, I'm pretty sure you all know very, very well. This quote just captures the essence of Year 13 stress, doesn't it? It's like a perfect storm of deadlines and super high stakes. So, the question is, how does social support buffer against this specific kind of pressure? This right here is your perfect AO2 paragraph, laid out. Emotional support comes from friends who say, "Me too," which makes you feel so much less alone. Instrumental support is your parents taking care of the practical stuff. Informational support is that killer feedback from a teacher that makes it crystal clear what you need to do. And esteem support, that's the encouragement from your family that keeps your self-belief going when things get really tough.
Okay, time to put on our critical thinking hats for AO3. Let's start with the strengths, the pros, of social support as an explanation for coping with stress.
First off, there is a mountain of strong empirical evidence, from controlled lab studies like CARMAX to real-world studies.
Second, it has fantastic explanatory value because it's biopsychosocial. It connects our minds, our bodies, and our relationships. And finally, it has led to some really practical, low-cost interventions like peer mentoring and buddy systems that we know actually work.
But, for a truly balanced evaluation, we have to look at the other side of the coin. What are the weaknesses or limitations of this whole theory?
A key issue here is the classic chicken and egg problem. See, most of the research is correlational, and that means we can't be 100% sure about the direction of cause and effect. Does having friends reduce your stress, or do people who are just naturally less stressed find it easier to make and keep friends in the first place? It's a tricky one.
So the 3 key limitations to remember are that correlational issue we just talked about, problems with measurement because self-report scales can be unreliable and biased, and this crucial idea of mismatched support. Sometimes getting the wrong kind of help, like getting a ton of unwanted advice when all you really need is a hug, can actually make your stress even worse. So we've covered the knowledge, the application, and the evaluation. Now let's bring it all together into a powerful conclusion that is definitely going to impress any examiner.
Here's your 3-step plan. Start by summarizing the core idea. Social support is a powerful buffer. Easy. Then, show your sophistication by acknowledging the complexities, that it's not always helpful, that it depends on the context. Finally, conclude with a balanced, nuanced statement. Social support is a protective moderator of stress, not some magical cure-all. That nuance is what gets the top marks.
So that leaves us with one final thought. Just take a moment to think about your own life. Who forms that protective shield for you? Because understanding that is the very first step to harnessing this incredibly powerful psychological tool for yourself.